So onto the main part of the presentation. We'll be focusing on feedback in the new grading scheme. So as you'll be aware, the QAA published the revised grading scheme in July 2023, and it will be effective from August 2024. We'll shortly show you a video summarising the grading scheme changes, and we'll be introducing a spreadsheet which will help you navigate the grading standards, the new grading standards. We'd like to thank City College Plymouth, who created the original spreadsheet, and to Jackie, who worked on their idea and developed the spreadsheet that you'll see now. So without further ado, we'll just go to go to the recap video, which will talk you through the basics of the new grading scheme.
This video is to look at the QAA's revised Access to HE grading scheme, which comes into effect on the 1st of August 2024. You can find the grading scheme handbook for more support on the QAA and the CAVA website. One of the main changes is that there will now be 3 grading standards instead of the previous 7 grade descriptors. Grading Standard 1, Knowledge and Understanding, maps loosely to Grading Descriptor 1 and 2. Grading Standard 2, Subject Specific Skills, maps loosely to Grading Descriptor 3 and 4. And Grading Standard 3, Transferable Skills, maps loosely to Grading Descriptor 5, 6 and 7. Every assignment you must use all 3 grading standards. The grading standards are made up of components. Looking at Grading Standard 1, there are 2 components, A and B. And when using Grading Standard 1, you must use both components. They are also made up of subcomponents. As you can see, in component A, you must choose between breadth or depth, and for component B, there is a bullet-pointed list of subcomponents for you to choose from. If you are doing a 3-credit unit, you must choose between 2 and 4 subcomponents, and if you are doing a 6 or 9-credit unit, you must choose between 2 and 6 subcomponents. Grading Standard 2 is very similar to Grading Standard 1. There are 2 components, A and B, and again, you must use both components when looking at Grading Standard 2. For the subcomponents, just like Grading Standard 1, there is a bullet-pointed list to choose from underneath component B. Irrespective of size, you must choose between 2 and 4 subcomponents. Grading Standard 3 is a little bit different. It has 3 components, A, B and C. You must choose at least 2 components in every unit, and all 3 components must be used in the assessment plan for each student. For the subcomponents, you can see there is a bullet-pointed list underneath component A and component B. You must choose between 2 and 4 subcomponents each time you use either of these components. Although component C doesn't have a bullet-pointed list, there are some choices there to choose from. Grading cannot take place until the students have met all of the learning objectives for that unit. That means if there is multiple assignments, students should not receive any graded feedback until they have completed all assignments and completed all of the learning objectives. We are now going to look at the CAVA assessment plan, which is a useful tool to make sure you have chosen the correct amount of components and subcomponents for your unit. When you open the assessment plan, this is what you will be able to see. The first thing you must do is put in the unit code of the unit you are looking at. That should then add in the unit title, credit value, and if it is graded. You need to check these are correct. You can then go and add in the assignment type. As you can see, everything is red. This means there is something you need to do to make it correct. Once it is correct, it will go grey. Starting with Grading Standard 1, Component A, you must choose breadth or depth. You can see it has gone grey, meaning you have done this correctly. For Grading Standard 1, Component B, as it is a 3-credit unit, you must choose between 2 and 4 subcomponents. If you click 2, 3 or 4, it will stay grey. But if you put in 5 subcomponents, it will go red. This shows you there is an error and you must fix it. Moving on to Grading Standard 2, there is no subcomponents for Component A, so you can move straight on to Component B. Again, you must pick between 2 and 4 subcomponents. If you put in more than 4 or less than 2, it will go red to show you there is an error. It is now grey as we have the correct amount of subcomponents. Moving on to Grading Standard 3, you must choose at least 2 components. If we were going to choose component A, you must choose between 2 and 4 subcomponents. It will stay red as we are looking at Grading Standard 3 as a whole and you have only chosen one component. Once we go on to grading standard 3 component B and choose between 2 and 4 subcomponents, we can see the grading standard goes grey. This is now acceptable. However, if you choose more than 4 subcomponents for either component A or B, it will go red again to show you there is an error, because you can choose 2 or 3 of the components. As you can see, if you've not got enough components or subcomponents for each component, it will go red. At the very top, it says GS3C missing. That means across this diploma, there is currently nowhere where there is evidence of component C. This is essential across the diploma. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us at admin@cava.ac.uk.
I would like to thank Georgia for putting that presentation, that video together. I think it really clarifies the key points of the revised grading scheme. And just to let you know that the spreadsheet has been linked to your new unit choices spreadsheet that's I believe Jackie's sent out recently. So you'll see on your unit choices spreadsheet, your first tab will be where the tab showing you which units you've selected, and then there'll be a tab marked assessment plan. If you click on that, that will bring up your grading, the assessment plan for your grading. So that's where you'll find the that particular spreadsheet. But as ever, please do get in touch if you need any support when you're completing that. So we'll move on to the main subject of our discussion today, and that's looking at formative feedback. So one of the key differences in the revised grading scheme is that in the past we've been able to provide grade indicators for each assignment. So that process has changed now, and as it was mentioned in the video, grading can only take place once the unit has been complete. That is, all learning outcomes have been met for the unit. Grading is much more holistic, a much more holistic process than it used to be. With CAVA, this is going to be quite a change. I think we're one of the few AVAs that uses a lot higher numbers of 6 and 9 credit units, which are more likely to have more than one assignment. So it is quite an issue for us, but it's in so although we can't give graded feedback to individual assignments, so for example, if you've got 2 assignments for a 6 credit unit, you cannot give graded feedback to the first assignment. However, there is the expectation that students will get formative feedback to support their progression. And feedback should identify strengths and weaknesses, which supports the improvement of performance. But grades shouldn't be applied or implied. So that does that can be quite a difficult situation to be in. It's something that I think providers, all providers have worked with for a while. Anybody who does subject content ungraded units, we've always advised that because grade descriptors haven't been applied to that unit, you can give formative feedback, but not feedback. That feedback shouldn't mention the language of the grade descriptors. So we've been doing this for a long time. It'll be quite a similar situation where we'll focus on the learning outcomes. So we've got, as you can see on the screen, we've got some key points to consider as you're providing this formative feedback. So we are encouraging providers to use the language of the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria, and you'll see shortly when we look at the examples, and if you've looked at the examples we've shared prior to the meeting, you see we've tried to create feedback that gives indication of where the student has just met the assessment criteria, where they've met the assessment criteria but occasionally exceeds the requirements, or if their performance surpasses the assessment criteria. So we have based it on individual learning outcomes, and that's just we've tried to use that process to indicate how learning outcomes can be used to provide feedback. We know it might look complicated, but we'd be really interested to have your feedback, and consider ways that we might share that might be better practice. What we're very clear to say that we cannot do is use the language of the grading the grading standards. So, for example, words like good, very good, excellent, sort of consistently. We would also advise trying to avoid using language of the subcomponents unless they are mentioned in the learning outcomes and assessment criteria themselves. But the key ones would be breadth or depth. That's a key part of the subcomponents. Obviously, if the learning outcomes are talking about theories or concepts or methods, and that they are in the language, obviously they will also be in the subcomponents. You'll be free to use that, because that's not talking about how well the students are doing. That's something that's an element you are looking at, but it's not talking about how well the students have performed. So it's really the performative verbs that we're looking at avoiding. So we've created some examples, so you can see here on the screen. You can see the one on the right. It's positive feedback, but it's not giving the student any feed forward about how they might improve their practice. Whereas the bubble on the left talks about what the student has done, but also how they might improve their practice. So I'm just going to hand over to Emma, who will talk to you about the exercise we're about to do.
Thank you, Barbara. Good afternoon, everyone. So for our activity, our task is going to be split into two parts today. So the first part of the activity, we're going to ask you to go into breakout rooms and have a look at an example of student feedback that CAVA has written. So this is to provide tutors with an idea of how feedback might be formulated. It's not intended for you to share this feedback grid with the students, but it could be used for tutors to create their own feedback based on the work that the students have submitted. You can now see on the screen, thank you, Georgia, that we've put the feedback into the grid. So from the far left column, you'll see the learning outcomes, and then there are 3 columns with feedback. We have used the learning outcome and tried to give positive and constructive feedback for each learning outcome. Next screen, please, Georgia. You can also see here that we've given you an example of some potentially non-compliant feedback. In your groups, we'd like you first to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes looking at the example that CAVA has provided and discussing it. So do you agree with the feedback that CAVA has provided? Could it be improved? And if so, how can it be improved? And why do you think the potentially non-compliant feedback is non-compliant? After about 10 minutes, a CAVA officer will join you for the second half of the activity. This is where we will support you with writing your own feedback. A CAVA officer will share with you a document with a range of units for you to choose from to write your own feedback in the group. Please have a go at completing as much of the grid as possible in the time that you have for the activity. We understand that it might be difficult to provide feedback on non-existent work. However, we are asking you to use your imagination, and focus here is to refine your feedback by using the learning outcome language. So let's just look at an example together. So on the screen, you can see that learning outcome number 1 is about a literature search to provide background information. So you'd look at learning outcome number 1 and think, what have the students done well? And where were there any areas for improvement? A CAVA officer will be present for this activity and will go through it with you again to advise you what you need to do. If you need any help with the activity, please ask. If you don't need any help, the CAVA officer will simply listen and support when needed. If you think of any questions while carrying out the activity, can I please ask you to add them to the Padlet, and then these will be discussed as a group in the question and answer session later on.